Are you recording? Hi everyone, welcome to today's internals. Today we're going to look at how to run a debate when you know nothing about the motion. The title is a bit misleading because I'm not going to actually teach you basic how to invent arguments or ideas. I'm just going to teach you a bunch of things that are useful to use in lots of debates. It's a chunky and long seminar, but hopefully it's a useful one for building stock arguments from first principle ideas that you can apply across multiple debates. So let's kick into it. The first thing, unfortunately, is you just need to know things, and that's what's going to help you the most in debates. We know nothing about the motion, you just need to know more things. So what I recommend generally is a couple of things. One, you don't need an in-depth overview of everything. You don't need to have a 3-hour podcast on everything in the world to be able to do debating. If you have a broad overview of what is going on in the world, that can help you. For those in the crowd who seem sad at the absence of a podcast, you can do that, but it's not a barrier to entry. I think the easiest way to do this is to go through Facebook and social media feeds. So as you're flicking around on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is that the youth use these days, you see the information come to you naturally. I also think explainer videos on YouTube are quite useful. If you just type into Google or to YouTube, what is inflation, you'll find a bunch of videos that explain what that concept is and how it works. And also watch old debates on YouTube or watch out rounds of tournaments. It's often the best way to see how debates run is to just watch other debates, because it's knowing a fact is half the job, but being able to put that into an actual argument and see how it's used is the more challenging part. So the more you see arguments used, the better you can do at that. I would also recommend the Australian Debating Council has a big YouTube channel now that has lots more videos going up there of old debates. So plenty of there to watch. There's also just like a metric shit ton of debates on YouTube you can check out. So let's look at building a case from bare facts. The important thing here is you only need to know one or two things, and very basic things, and you can build out a case from there by logic, by intuition, and by just a leap of good faith. We're going to work through an example as a team to start with. This was a motion that I got with UADC at Athens Open when we were preparing for Worlds one year. And the motion was that we regret the Palestinian rejection of the US Economic Peace Summit in Bahrain. The problem UADC and I faced at opening position was twofold. One, a team from Israel in OG, and two, so we didn't beat peace. So if I say things that don't make sense, it's just gov means affirmative, neg means, opposition means negative. We also didn't know that there was a peace summit in Bahrain on the table. So we were really like, what are we going to do here? So let's work through this as a group, because we actually ended up walking out with a second in this debate. We beat one Israeli team, we lost one other Israeli team. So, based just off that, what are some very bare facts we know about the actors and stakeholders of this debate? Yeah.
Palestine's fighting with Israel and the US backs Israel?
Yes, awesome. So we know those two things. They don't like each other, and that's probably why there's a peace summit. And if we didn't know that there was a peace summit, if we didn't know they were fighting each other, the presence of the word peace summit ought to imply that there is a conflict that needs to be resolved, right? So we know those things. We've got Palestine as a peace summit, so it probably involves Israel because they're fighting Israel, and the USA is involved. We know the USA backs Israel. Yeah.
Bahrain is on the sunny border. It's like a relatively neutral, more westernized state in the Middle East.
Ah, awesome. So we've got a nice neutral actor there in Bahrain. All right then. So let's start then. Actually, can't remember what's on the next slide. All right. So it doesn't actually do any previous. So we've got those basic facts. Let's now think about the affirmative case. So we, on affirmative, we're regretting the rejection. So we're saying we should have accepted the deal. What are some very general reasons, using only those facts, we think it might be good to go to an economic peace deal? Yes, Aaron.
Probably get economic support for your people and medical support and that sort of thing.
Yep, awesome. I love that your brain went first to the economics, but what is one step before that in an economic peace deal that you might want to get out of it?
Peace.
Peace, yes, peace in our times. So you want to get peace, you want to stop war, etc. And you also want to have the economic growth aspect of it as well. So it's probably bad then that they rejected that deal. And what happens when you reject a deal to your image, to other people cooperating with you? Yes, Isaac.
Bad global outcomes, i.e. sanctions or diplomatic crap.
Absolutely, yeah. Bad diplomatic crap. So people don't like you, you get sanctioned, it looks bad. Are you likely to get another offer of a peace deal in the short term?
No.
No, exactly right. So at this point then, we've built a reasonably solid AF case out of nothing.
Yes.
And we didn't know all the ins and outs of it. We still at this point don't know what this peace summit is about, but we've got enough to start running our AF case on. Let's talk about the neg case then. So in the negative we're saying, no, we don't regret it, rejecting it was the right thing to do. Why might we want to reject a peace summit with Israel that is backed by the US? Dan.
The terms and conditions are really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a reason they said no, right? So probably because the deal was going to look bad. Why do we think the deal would look bad? Yes?
Because there's only
Absolutely, because you've got the fucking massive US plus Israel against Palestine, and that's obviously a huge power imbalance likely to get fucked over. So rejecting the deal means you're likely to get a better stance, etc. So already, again, we still don't know what this peace deal's about, but we've got a negative case we can run with now. Does that make sense to everybody? So hopefully what we've done out of this exercise, we've all feel a little bit more confident that we can do this, we'll work together as a team. All right. Sometimes it can go wrong though, and that is okay. So I got this motion many years ago. This House believes that Malaysia should abandon its system of privileges for Bumiputra. So we applied the same thing. It's like, all right, a system of privileges, Bumiputra sounds like a cultural minority group, abandon its system of privileges, that means it's getting affirmative action. And we're in opposition, right? So we're like, oh, obviously not, right? Oppressed minority groups should have privileges, they should have affirmative action, they should get support, etc. So we ran a whole massive case on why this group must have support as if they were an important minority cultural group. As Isaac can see, because he's laughing, the Bumiputra is a minority, but it is the ruling minority, and these privileges help enshrine its power in Malaysia. So we took a hard donut in that round, like a hard loss, but the thing you take from that is that like it's okay if it goes wrong, because you learn something, you walk away and you get better at it. So you don't have to win every debate or get every case right, but the system of working through it will help. So let's go now through a bit more something we call first principles. So for more information on first principles, I really advise looking up the Tim Sonnreich guides. I'll link them in the description of the video below, and I'll also post them along with these slides, etc., somewhere later on. They're excellent. They were written about 10 or 12 years ago now, but from Monash, and they still really hit home about how to actually do this in a lot more time than we'll have tonight. What first principles are is they're a general idea, but they're applicable to lots of debates in a certain area. So when you get any debate on democracy, you can run a first principles on democracy kind of case. And they get better the more you know. So the more you know about the world, the more practice them, the better they'll be. But they're an excellent jumping on point for getting into debating for starting things. So let's have a quick overview of them at the moment. Bless you. But ever more people wonder in this video who I said bless you to, and I'll never know. So let's start with a really common one. What is the role of government, freedom of choice, consent? And we talk about consent in this, we're not talking about like consent in sexual situations necessarily. We're talking more about just broadly, can you consent to a decision or a choice or an outcome that's been happening to you? So this is a particularly useful argument you will run in any debate about banning things, banning smoking, banning gambling, banning contact sports, whatever you want to do. And the general question you have in a debate like this is big government versus small government. And once you can figure out which side of the motion you're on, the big or the small side, you can then build a case based off that using some simple basic arguments. So let's start by actually defining what big and small is. Oh my goodness, hello. Okay. So let's talk about big government. So what does big government mean? Any ideas? Oh, yes.
There's a really large bureaucratic layer of everything.
Yeah.
More red tape.
Yeah, huge bureaucratic government, lots of red tape, lots of layers to things. Often government makes lots and lots of laws and really tries to regulate lots of aspects of your life, lots of market intervention. What is a small government?
One that does fuck all.
Yes, exactly. Small governments really retreat, very, very little intervention. All they're there to do is to provide national security and enforce contracts, and that is it. So traditionally, you have like a conservative government, Liberals, Republicans would be more small government, and your big government would be more of your Democrats, Labour, etc. So the questions you need to ask in these debates are, when should the government step in, and is this the right way for them to step in? And that is basically what the clash becomes. So if you know nothing about what sin taxes are or what they would be, they'll normally define what sin taxes are. And then you just sort of say, all right, do we think the government should step in here? Should they not? And is it the right way to do it? I just want to see what's on the next slide. Oh, okay. So if you're on, if we're on a motion that we should abolish all sin taxes, and your side affirmative, are you big or small?
Small.
Small. You're abolishing taxes.
Oh, abolishing taxes.
Yeah. So, all right, we're abolishing taxes, so that means we're small government, so that means we should start thinking about what type of arguments. One, the government has no right to regulate what food I consume or what alcohol I consume. It's a legitimate legal choice. Benefits people making the choice, prove they can make the choice. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If we're on negative, we're like, oh no, we are big government, we think sin taxes are good, so we're going to run arguments on why the government has a right to step in here, so why the government should ban things like, tax things like gambling, alcohol, cigarettes, and that a tax is the right way to do it. So for those who haven't heard of sin taxes before, that's just the extra tax the government does on bad things. So like there's a massive tax on cigarettes, on alcohol, there should be some on gambling, I think there is on, yeah, there's massive gambling revenue. So all those things are sin taxes because they are sinful activities, quote unquote. And they're quite controversial depending on whether you sit in big or small government. Obviously they're probably a good idea, but also probably should just ban bad things. Anyway, so that's the first general, you'll always use your stock arguments. So think about that in any sort of debating debate. When we look more specifically at consent, so even that syntax or debating debate, you're going to be running an argument as to why a person can or cannot consent to the thing happening in the debate. And that is about whether or not the individual has the right to make that freedom of choice. So if ever you've got a debate about running freedom of choice, your immediate thought should be, how do I prove what freedom of choice is? You need to prove 4 things. And if you can prove those 4 things either exist or do not exist, that will take you a long way in winning the debate. So the 4 things you need for consent arguments. 1 is knowledge. Does the person know what they're doing, what potential side effects are, the long-term consequences, etc. of their action? 2, do they have the capacity to make those decisions? What we mean by capacity is like, are they over 18? Are they fully mentally well? So things like people with mental impairments, things like that, don't have full capacity to make decisions. Thirdly, are they free from influence? So like, are they being pressured into making this decision? Is there an overriding power imbalance, as you mentioned earlier, that stops them doing this? And fourthly, do they have alternatives? Can they say no? Can they do something else instead? And not all of those things need to exist to 100% because everything's in a spectrum, right? Like, did anyone here have their parents kind of pressure them from the day they were born they should go to university? Yeah? Was that necessarily an evil, malicious pressure? No, it was good pressure, right? I mean, maybe. It's all on a spectrum, right?
How are you debating?
Exactly. You can't really debate without uni. So, you need to think about things on a spectrum and prove why it's sufficient enough to achieve this outcome. And similarly from neg, also conversely from neg, you want to do the opposite. So you want to prove why it is insufficient on these levels to do that. So read the motion, technology exists to let individuals permanently erase parts of their memory, that we should allow the use of this technology. And we're running a consent argument on app. You would want to run through, a lot of this is done in modelling too, why have access to those 4 things. So, we might make a pamphlet, we make an info briefing about to give them knowledge. We make sure psychiatrists check them, make sure they're sane and of a clear mind. That gives you capacity. We'd also have police checks to make sure no one's pressuring them to forget they, I don't want to make Chris forget that I owe him $10, so they're going to make sure I'm not pressuring Chris. And they're going to make sure I can choose something else instead. So you can sort of explain why all those barriers are met and therefore it should be allowed. If you're on neg, you would want to do the opposite. You don't have to target all 4 things. Like, you're probably like, oh, yep, all right, fine. We'll agree with you that you won't let people who can't make reasonable choices, like 4-year-olds, erase their memories. That's not worth rebutting, right? But what you might want to target is knowledge, for example, in this debate from negative. So what might be the problem with consenting from a knowledge perspective in this debate? Isaac.
Fundamentally unknowable, or there's a case to be made that it's fundamentally unknowable.
Absolutely, because we don't know what impact a memory has on us, right? Like, if I remove this one memory from here that's bad for me, do I forget everything that comes after it? Do I know what the impact is? And we can't know, because it's us. It's not replicable across multiple people. Does that make sense? Awesome. And then from neg, from app, you can rebut that by saying, but you're aware of the risk, so that is okay. Like when you play rugby league, you don't know what type of concussion you'll get. You know there'll be a concussion, right? So it's like relative, levels of consent. Will I get dementia at 30 or 50? You just don't know the answer. But you know enough of the risk. All right, that's broadly freedom of choice. Let's talk now about criminal justice system debates. We're going to cover a lot of broad areas tonight in the next half hour. So, any debate in the criminal justice system, law and order, whatever, there are 4 main elements of the criminal justice system you should think about. Retribution, protection, rehabilitation, and deterrence. And each of those things prioritizes a different person in the criminal justice system. So retribution is focused on the victim, which is about punishment, it's about sending them to jail, it's about fining them, it's about killing them in capital punishment systems. Protection is about the community. It's about saying, we want to lock this person up so they don't commit future harm to other people around us. Rehab, that focuses on the offender. So we want to make sure that person's rehabilitated, doesn't commit more crimes in the future. And deterrence is focused on everybody. Don't do bad things will happen to you. So, what you want to do when you're going to prep room in a criminal justice debate is figure out which one of these things your side of the motion is most likely to be about, and then you can then you just build arguments as to why that thing is the most important part of the criminal justice system, and why this thing, like the motion, helps achieve that outcome. Does that make sense? So already then, true arguments, your first aspect is good to go. Let's look at the first example here, that with the consent of victims, those found guilty of crimes should be able to pay compensation to victims instead of going to jail. If you're on AF, which of those four are you most focused on? Not quite. That's next. Care about the victim, right? Because you are. Oh, sorry. You retribution you are correct. It is about the victim. So, sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, I thought what you said, so like.
That's bad. But you on average, you care about the victim most in this debate. So you want to explain why the criminal justice system ought to focus most of its efforts around retribution, but from a victim perspective, what gives them the best outcomes. And if a victim needs money, they should have the priority to be able to say, I want money so that person going to jail, and that best helps them. And you branch it out from there. If we're negative, what do you think our focuses are? Is it just one other? Is it multiple others? Protection?
Yeah, community focused, and also disrupt as well, I guess.
Yep, awesome. So,
Because it is like probably better to fix the behavior instead of saying, hey,
you said rehab?
yeah.
Yeah, so you're both correct. All three of the other ones can work for this debate. I'd probably prioritise rehab, because that's where the biggest one, right? Because that is the biggest problem for the offender. But also, in terms of protection and deterrence, it's like, the problem with banking your case on those ones is that they might, after quite reasonably modelled, we wouldn't allow this for serial murderers or really serious crimes. Like if you're getting 25 years or life, you don't get this. But if you're getting something less than that, you would get this. So I think rehab is the way to go with this one, but also just sort of saying, you can run a bunch of stuff about how it's classless and how it's unfair because, only rich people can get out of it. Which is where I think deterrence comes more into it, because now rich people aren't deterred. Awesome. That we should abolish plea bargains. We're on AF in this debate. Who do we care about most of all? A plea bargain is where you can negotiate your sentence down by pleading guilty. So it's like, yep, I'll plead guilty to a lower charge, or I'll plead guilty if you knock 10 years off my sentence, or whatever. From AF? Yeah? Yes, we are. We do care much about that because we want to fuck these criminals. They're bad. We must put them in jail for longer. And this gets out earlier. So yeah, we absolutely care about the offender. We care about the victim more. If we're on neg, who do we care about?
Rehabilitation.
Offenders.
Yeah, offenders. We want to give them the best outcomes. We don't want them to be in jail for long when they don't need to be. They're showing genuine remorse. They should be able to get out of it. And that one actually, I think the next two actually start to introduce another factor in these debates, is just the criminal justice system as a whole. Do you care about outcomes of courts being quickly achieving justice? Do you care about them achieving justice fairly? Those things have to come in now as well. And lastly, on actually running out, we don't have time. Electing judges then. Who do we care most about there? Community, yes, why?
Because it's community representation. So it's kind of almost more of democracy than criminal justice.
Exactly. And he's clicked on things overlap. We'll come to democracy in a second, so hold this judge's topic for that as well. And if we're neg, what do we care most about? Probably rehab in this case too, because generally you've got to say that if we elect judges, be the most pro tough on crime judges we've elected, there'll be no rehab then, and that's bad for the system. Does that make sense? All right, what's the topic? Which of these four are we on? Why is that important? More important than other things, how do we achieve that thing? And there you go, you can take any criminal justice debate you want. Speaking of democracy, so debates about democracy also largely revolve around three elements and weighing them up against a fourth element. So it's accountability, so people being held responsible for their actions. So if you make a choice, you can get you have to suffer a consequence of that choice. Representation, so people having their voices heard in Parliament or government or whatever. And participation, so people feel like they're actively involved in society and being a part of the process. They're voting, they're getting their democracy sausage, they're volunteering, they're joining political parties, etc. Hopefully the good political parties. Party. And then you must compare all of those things against outcomes, right? So we care about democracy insofar as it's an instrument to getting good outcomes, right? Was that Winston Churchill quote, democracy is the worst system, but it's the best system we've got, or something like that? Or it's better than all the rest of them? I can't remember. But basically, the idea here is if democracy is not producing good outcomes, we don't care about it, even if it does maybe increase one or more of these other elements here. So, I know, does everyone across what those three elements are before I go into examples? Yeah? All right. So if we had the first motion that we should abolish all political parties and instead force people to run as independents, let's think about AF. AF would probably care more about the top three elements, and NEG's probably going to care more about the outcomes. So for AF for a second, what do we think everyone running an independent is going to do for accountability? Yeah.
I'll hide behind shields of party politics.
Exactly. You are the one making the choices. You can't be like, well, the party exec told me to. Sorry. So you have to actually stand up for things you say. What about representation? How do independents increase representation?
They're more locally targeted.
Yep. Awesome. More likely targeted.
I was gonna say that they're more tailored to people's needs, opposed to having people decide how it's going to respond because they're the closest aligned to our values.
Absolutely right. And things like voter preferences, you're more directly aligned because you have like 17 voter preferences. When you've got a major party, you have to compromise some to prioritise other. Independent can prioritise the ones you actually want. And participation. What does participation mean? What do you think is going to happen with participation if everyone runs independence? Hopefully more people get involved now because they don't see it as like, it's just the two big parties going at each other again. I've got no chance, I can have no impact. What are we going to say on NEG though? Like, I will say NEG can probably contest all three of those things as well. But what is NEG going to prioritise in this debate more likely? I think I gave the answer earlier. Outcomes, yes, because what's going to happen to democracy if you have everyone, it was 171 seats in federal parliament in Australia?
150?
150? Yeah, what's going to, 150 even when the speaker goes on. Anyway, sorry, sad that's on camera. What's going to happen if every single one of them is an independent like Bob Catter or Jackie Lambie or Craig Lowndy or whatever? It's going to be a lot funnier? All right, okay. Debate over, AF wins. What's actually likely to happen?
Nothing.
Nothing, why not?
Because how do you decide who the Prime Minister is? How do you pass bills? How do you guarantee supply?
Yep.
Yes, you're going to have to form parties anyway.
Exactly.
So you go to the Governor General and be like, I want to run the country.
100%. Emma nails it there. They're going to have to, no one's going to be able to make a fucking decision because it's 150 different people. Parties are very useful in achieving that. But then this actually, Emma points out the trap that negative teams are into in this debate. They go there and go, obviously what will happen is they'll form broad coalitions of ideas around similar ideological positions and they'll all vote together in large blocks. And all of a sudden we've just created political parties again, right? So negative often runs into a problem in this debate of just actually proposing the status quo, but like not calling the status quo. That's why it's not a great topic all the time. Sorry, negative, affirmative would do that. Sorry, yes. All right. Next topic then, the decisions about climate change policy should be made by a panel of independent experts rather than elected government officials. If you're on AF, what do you care about most in this debate? Outcomes. Presumably because climate change is bad, we should stop it, politicians can't do it, right? So we want outcomes to fix it. What are we going to say on negative though? What do we care about?
Representation.
Representation. We want our voices heard, we want to hear our points made, so you should talk about why all these three things matter.
Could you also run an outcomes debate? Like if it's technocrats, you could just point at the Reserve Bank and say it just doesn't work.
Absolutely. So all these things can run from both sides, but I think it's where the biggest starting point would be to be like, we do not care about it, it's going to be bad. I think that the trick with any sort of debate you have about like technocrats versus elected officials, as I think for those who were the debate with Dan and I the other week, where we had, what was our technocrat? Law and order policy was going to be run by technocrats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the other
The
week.
CSG would be replaced by
Yeah.
all councilmen.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, so we're just going to replace all criminal justice elected with a appointed technocrats. In that debate, it's the same as this debate. The question is like, there is no 100% perfect, technically correct answer. Like everything has trade-offs, consequences, etc. So when a decision affects everybody, the only way to make that trade-off is to have everyone have a say on what trade-off they're happy with. And democracy is imperfect, but the best way we can achieve that outcome. All right, so that's democracy debates. What do we care about? Those three elements versus outcomes. Which side are we on? Run with those arguments. And again, any democracy debate, you've now got at least 2 to 3 arguments, or possibly even 4 arguments, as to how you can win that debate. Let's talk about economics. It is not as scary as people think. There are actually surprisingly few debates that require you to have an economics degree to access them. Because very little debates are going to be like, this House believes the Reserve Bank should raise interest rates by 0.25% in 2 months' time with a 0.5% drop in 6 months. Like, no one's ever going to ask you that debate, as much as I'm sure Jess would enjoy that debate, being an economics whiz that she is. So, the thing about economics debates is what they're actually about is just how do stakeholders in the debate, the people affected by the motion, respond to changes in the market, so respond to the model that happens. We do this thing, what do people do as a result of that? What are their incentives? Do people like it? Do they not like it? What do they do if they don't like it or they don't like it? So the government should bail out failing banks. So what this basically means is a bank is broken, it's failing, it's got no money left. When banks run out of money, they just collapse, right? They can do one of two things. They can collapse and no one gets their money back, or the government can just like pour money into them and guarantee all the loans. So if you're a bank and you know the government is going to always pay your bills if you fuck up, what are your incentives then? Take risks. Make stupid investments. Do the whole GFC all over again. Because you know there's no consequence. Are you here for another GFC? You were too young to remember the horrors of the GFC.
We just want cheap houses.
I guess it's, like, there's a lot of suffering. There are other ways to achieve cheap houses than that. What was that debate at Amy Spring last year? It was this house would do X to fix the housing crisis, and Gov could pick what X was. It was a stupid motion because it massively was in favour of Gov. I'm just imagining Bregan up there and being like, we would have another GFC as our way to fix the housing market. It might be the only way option with this debate. Yeah. All right, so the government should say, they take more risks, they do bad behaviour. And there is no economics in that yet. It is just an incentive. It's the same thing as like a rich kid whose parents pay all their bills and all that sort of stuff. They have no consequence, they can do whatever they want. But if a bank doesn't have that, knows the government won't bail them out, what changes about their incentives?
Just don't think I see anything that potentially makes them more money or don't hand out loans that are potentially sketchy.
Exactly. Far less risky. Don't give sketchy loans out. Don't invest in projects that might not work out. Something that we should break up Google. So we should take Google, break into its most constituent parts and things like that. That's probably one of the more technical ones on this topic, on this list. But if we're an app, it's just like, what happens when you've got a really big and powerful company that controls everything?
Monopoly's bad.
Monopoly's bad, right? Like, if it has no competitor, it can do it like fucking Yahoo and Bing don't count as competitors. But like, if it can do whatever it wants as a monopoly, that means it has no incentive. So if you don't have a competitor pushing at your door, what does that mean for you in terms of how you treat customers and how you treat your product? Yeah?
Yeah.
If you have no competitors.
Oh, if you don't have any
Worse, yes. All right.
You don't care.
You don't care. So with your customers, you just treat them like shit. You give them a poor quality product. Kind of like Facebook is really awful now because it has no. Well, I mean, Facebook's odd because it does have a lot of competitors, but weirdly, its specific niche. I guess Facebook events and groups, the only things it has left that are unique. It doesn't have competitors, so it can really treat them badly. It's also so important for businesses now. Its business interface is awful. Oh, yeah, getting a lot older on Facebook now. So it doesn't care about the younger, it doesn't care about its consumers as much. But also, if there's no one pushing a product to be better, the product won't get better. It doesn't have to. There's no one else fighting its heels to improve things. So breaking up Google means like you get better products, less control, treat customers better, but also dangerous if a company controls everything. I am running a little bit on time, so we'll skip the next two examples, but that is the basic idea of like, who's impacted by this model? Do they like it or not like it? What will they do as a consequence? And start to build ideas off that. It's all about incentives. The next thing with economics, though, is you do need to impact things, not things. Great shit brand, but you need to impact things. So just saying that unemployment goes up it's like, alright, it seems bad, but that doesn't actually mean very much, right? Like, you need to say why that's so bad. That means people can't put food on the table. That means people, if they're like quite old, will never get another job again. They spend 2 or 3 years unemployed, they become structurally unemployed, so they don't have skills that are relevant anymore, so they can never get a job again. There's a massive correlation between unemployment rate going up and the suicide rate skyrocketing as well in the areas where unemployment's high. And that's how you make a judge care about things. When inflation goes up, that means that people can't afford to, pay for food. If people might have to sell their house, they can't meet rent, they have to sacrifice things to go forward. So think about how you can actually make a judge care about the real world impact on this person and what matters. For example, things like, I've actually just run through 2 or 3 examples. But everyone, especially high school kids, is like, this will stimulate economic growth and that's a benefit. Like I had a debate about shark culling once. And issue 1 was economics of shark tourism versus selling shark teeth. And both teams claimed economic growth. What does that mean, you hate children?
They have so many teeth though, Rob.
That's literally one of their mechanisms. The other funny part about that debate was AF's model was we'd arm lifeguards with harpoons, and that's how we'd do the shark culling. And first negative response was you can't do that because they are lifeguards. They guard life, they don't take life, doesn't matter what life it is.
That's the syntax stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. So, what does growth mean? Growth means people make more money. When the economy gets bigger, it means there's more money for people to spend. People have quality of life improved because they can afford nicer things. And when everyone's making money, everyone's kind of happy. So actually impact what that term growth means. And we've been through inflation and unemployment. Let's talk then about feminism. So this is another common topic area you'll get all the time. And broadly, feminism debates about whether feminism should be broad or should be narrow. So when you have a broad church of feminism, that means lots of views and lots of disagreements, and it maximizes choices, whatever the consequences. So you think of this more as like a really pro-choice sort of approach to feminism. So that would be like, you could be both pro-life or pro-choice and be considered a feminist. You could be both someone who thinks that women get more fulfillment out of being in the home and still be a feminist, as well as someone who thinks women have more fulfillment out of being in a job and getting home. To be clear, these are examples I'm using that don't reflect any views I have on feminism. And that's a broad church. Everyone's welcome in. A narrow view is far more smaller, obviously narrow, but it's a cohesive view. The idea is you have one vision, one approach. There are things that feminism stands for, and if you don't stand for those things, you are not feminist. And it is happy to limit women's choices based on what it perceives as in the best interest of the movement or of women individually or as a group. And if you can go to a topic and figure out, all right, we broad or narrow, you can then build a case around that as to what the consequences are, which I think is the next slide. So, yes, let's have a look at these examples and figure out if we're broad or if we're narrow. So the feminist movement should actively include male leaders, and we're on affirmative. We're broad or narrow?
Broad.
We're broad, yeah, we want more people involved in feminism. Bring on in the male leaders. And then we sort of say, all right, so it's good to have, that's what we are. Why is it good to have more people involved in feminism? Whoever they are. Exactly, more people fighting for your cause, more political capital, more donations, more reach, etc. If you're negative, why might you not want to include male leaders? Why might you want to be more narrow? Maybe it dilutes the leadership in feminism. It's like every one man takes the spot taken away from a woman. They might disagree on same issues. It might be making an unsafe space for a lot of women too to have men involved in the movement. So you want to be more like, feminism needs to look like this. It's better for all our members to look this way. The feminist movement should support artificial wombs. This is like a hypothetical debate of assuming you could just grow the baby outside. Should feminism support that? Are we broad or narrow on that? Broad. Maximize women's choices. More women should be able to do this thing. It is good for women to have choice. And you run a whole case on why choice is really good for women. On neg, why might we oppose this? Think about who's what's going to happen if we suddenly women start growing babies outside their bodies? Do they have to take maternity leave anymore? Do they have to take pregnancy leave? Our employers are going to be like, no, you should definitely take the artificial womb and work for me for 9 more months or 8 more months, whatever. So it's the pressures that will apply around women to take this choice that might be that something they don't want to do will create problems for the movement as overall, or maybe just massively prioritises rich women who can afford this thing and therefore creates an inequality for all women because then the expectation is that all women do what rich women can do. So you will be more narrow because it hurts more people than it helps. I think the other two actually, I kind of messed up these as examples. The third one is also AF is broad and neg is narrow. But the fourth one is AF is narrow and neg is broad because it's not supporting something. So once you figure out, so the tip of feminist debate, figure out are we broad or are we narrow? And then if we figure out that we're broad, we run a case on why this thing has a good outcome for women, why women can and should be able to consent to that, and why feminism should care about that right to consent. If we're on the narrow side, we're thinking about we're narrow, we think we should restrict a choice, that means there has to be a harm associated with this. We figure out what the harm is, let's run a case on why this harm is so bad that feminism ought not support it. And there's more on feminism in a second. We talk more broadly about movement debates. Hold that thought. So what we do with this is we just put into clashes, right? So then we go into like, what is, so all feminism debates will largely have 3 clashes. What is the goal of feminism? What should it look like? Who should be involved? Secondly, do these policies actually advance the rights of these women? Characterize the scale of the people we're talking about, characterize who the key stakeholders are, and then thirdly, what is the impact on the movement? You know, if we have a broader church, does that mean more women get disaffected from the feminist movement because if people disagree with them in there? So we let a whole bunch of pro-lifers into feminism, to all of a sudden a bunch of vulnerable women who are trying to seek abortions, something like feminism no longer speaks for them. Or if we have like a whole bunch of wealthy white women in feminism, the women of colour feel like feminism doesn't speak for them, etc., etc. If J.K. Rowling's a feminist, a bunch of trans women no longer feel like feminism's for them, and how that impacts the movement's capacity to succeed. Thinking about the consequences of the movement are also really important. So, are we narrow? Are we broad? Also, I said before, into clashes then, goal, outcomes, movement. Speaking of movements, let's talk about movement debates. So, this is a more broader approach. So we're going to zooming out from feminism now to look at things like just more broad social movements. Things like Black Lives Matter, the trans movement, workers' unions, etc. So whatever the movement is, you can start to derive very basic goals that all movements will have, and then it's about whether or not the motion helps us or hinders us in achieving those goals. Can anyone take a guess at what, very broadly, the goals of any social movement are? One really big obvious one. Change, yes, exactly. What's the second one likely to be? Maybe this helps you achieve that change.
Recognition or like validity?
Yes, you want recognition, you want media coverage, you want attention. And thirdly, does every good movement need?
Followers.
Yeah, on that track?
Support and followers.
Yes, it needs members, it needs supporters, it needs followers, it needs members. How? We got it right. So, members, policy, and media. But those are complicated, right? So members, the question is whether or not you retain existing members or gain more members. So if we look at a debate, again using feminism as an example, letting in male leaders, does that gain us more members by inspiring men to pick up the feminist flag, or do we actually lose more women who no longer agree with or don't want to be active feminists because of what's happened at this level? And then which is more important in this debate? Policy change, pretty straightforward. Do we actually get the outcomes we want? And thirdly, media attention, recognition, validity, etc., as Emma was saying. But that can go 2 ways, right? Because like, you could do a really cool thing, but then Elle Jones is still going to say you're bad. So think about, like, does media attention change in the debate? Is it symmetric? Who is sending it, etc.? So if we had the motion here that we support the use of violence as a means of protest by social groups, let's run through those 3 things from ACT. What is likely to happen to our membership if we support the use of violence? What are we going to say on membership? Is it going to go up? On ACT?
It might depend on how big your social group is. Like if you're a tiny social group, you might gain more people, and if you're a large social group, you'll probably lose people.
Awesome. But we're on ACT, so we want to say we gain more members in general, right? So that's probably because if we're a small group, more attention. That probably also applies to big groups too. We actually show we're taking change now. We show we're doing things, we're making an impact in the world. How does use of violence maybe be a policy change?
Threatening people is generally a pretty good way of getting to do what you want.
Yeah, like there's definitely that approach. Maybe it's also just like making people, conscious of it. Like the BLM riots in America brought to a head a lot of issues that were bubbling on themselves and not getting attention, and that's how they force politicians taking changes. And then media attention is probably the most controversial point of this one.
Media and news cycles thrive off of things like violence, so they'll take that and they'll run with it for way longer.
Absolutely. So you get more media attention. Is it going to be a good thing though? Like, there's going to be good coverage? Exactly. So getting coverage is good coverage, because really at some point, you're always going to get negative commentary if you're a minority group. But maybe now someone puts up a positive spin on you, or you have a debate about it, or people can think about it a bit more. And usually from there, you do the opposite of all those things. All right, running out of time. So, movement debates, members, policy, attention. Think about that. Whatever debate you've got, can we achieve those 3 things better on our side? International relations then. It's a little bit of what we're going to hear about tonight, but only very briefly. There are, I guess, 3 broad types of international relations debates you're going to get. This is not exhaustive by any means. You could get debates about intervention. Should we do something to somebody else? militarily, make sanctions, and have a naughty word to them, etc. Foreign aid, should things be conditional? Should they be unconditional? Are they effective in the way we're doing things? And thirdly, how best do we engage with foreign leaders? Should we be tough on them, or should we try and bring them to the table to discuss and to negotiate and work things out? So, in any type of intervention debate you're doing, there are 3 questions you should ask. Should we do it? Can we do it? What are the long-term impacts? And if you ask those things alpha or neg, you will immediately have a case. So every time you get international debate about doing anything in another country, sanctioning it, bombing it, invading it, should we, can we, long-term impacts? There is a textbook speech on this from Australs 2010 about whether or not Australia and New Zealand should invade Fiji. There had just been a coup in Fiji at the time, to give some context. It wasn't like, just randomly let's invade Fiji because we like their
I
resorts.
thought the textbook speech on this was the World's Grand Final on the invading Zimbabwe.
So I have a controversial take on this one. They don't prove the motion. So the motion is that we should invade Zimbabwe. Their case is we should threaten to invade Zimbabwe, and here's why threatening will work, and never actually defend invading Zimbabwe. But they won world, so like, you know, I have so maybe, you know, make your own judgment about who's right and who's wrong. I think Dan is right. That's probably the other textbook speech. I'm just a massive Elle Jones fan, and she's the one who did the one on Fiji. I should also link that somewhere here as well. Let's not do the jokey invade New Zealand one. Let's do it. So this was relevant a couple of weeks ago at UTS because we'd actually just done that debate a couple of weeks ago as a welcome to debating. So if we're invading New Zealand, let's broadly ask, just generically, should we do it? Is there an imperative or a reason we want to invade New Zealand? Not really. I mean, it's kind of fine as it is. We made a big case because it was just after Sintra Ardern got turfed out. Our case was like political instability, leader forced out by junior representative, economic collapse due to the housing crisis, climate change, but we made a whole bunch of shit up. Or just really talked about some basic stuff. But like, there's no imperative, no reason to do it. So on app, you're probably going to lose on should we do it, and next we're going to win on should we do it. But on the question of can we do it, who's likely to win the argument whether we can invade New Zealand? App.
Yeah.
They had no navy, no air force, no marines, a tiny army. Like, we could very easily do it. So we win on the can we do it. Long-term consequences is probably the most, you know, it could go either way in the debate. Because maybe New Zealand would be better off just being another state of Australia. We'd win the rugby union a lot more because all the All Blacks play for Wallabies. Maybe no one would care because like nothing much would change. And also New Zealand sells pies at Macca's. If we can get that over here,
Wait, actually?
yeah, they sell pies at Macca's. It's great.
Why?
And for those who drink beer, they sell in Australia they get 6 packs and 24 packs. In New Zealand they sell 12 packs, which I'm told is the optimal number to take to a party. If you lose a few, you give a few away, and you drink the rest. Whereas a 6-pack is too few, in a case it's too many. So they sell 12 packs over there. So like there are lots of good things New Zealand can bring over here. Sorry?
You're saying a case is too.
Responsible Kiwis or boring Kiwis, depending on what you're at. If we're invading Russia, it probably gets more difficult because, like, should we invade Russia? Are there a lot of, is there an imperative or a reason to invade Russia at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're kind of invading another country. They're doing some pretty fucked up stuff. Like there's a reason to do it. The question of could we do it is probably more controversial because they would nuke us. And that would probably, I'm told, be bad. Or you can run a deeply nihilist case and say that's good. The world would end and it's all over.
We probably get Siberia.
Siberia?
Yeah, we probably still. We would probably
Oh,
get
win
Did
back
you say they'd
Siberia.
give
That's your
us-
benefit.
They'd give us Siberia.
Siberia. Yeah, I mean, what do they have?
No, there's no way they would give us Siberia.
There's too much
We
oil
they
there.
sold
isn't it?
Alaska to the United States because no one was using it.
Yeah, but Putin wasn't in charge then.
Yeah, exactly.
But the important thing about these two topics is think about your strategy, right? If you're on negative, the reason you don't want to invade New Zealand is not because it'd be difficult, because it's wrong. The reason you don't want to invade Russia is not because it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, it's because it'd be hard. It might be bad in the long term. So think about what is the most, like where do we target our case and what do we prioritize? And then to make it even more Austral specific, your reply speeches might then become about why the imperative or the outcome is the most important thing the judge should adjudicate the debate on. All right. Sorry, Jess, I'll try and wrap up soon. Okay. Sports debates. My favourite. Very few sports debates, regrettably, are about the actual intricacies of sports, their rules, or their tactics. So you're unlikely outside of a sports tournament to you get motions like regretting the rise of T20 cricket or opposing the introduction of the 50-22 rule in rugby union, which is a stupid fucking rule in rugby union. They should never have implemented it. But anyway.
What's that on the screen there?
That is the South Sydney Rabbitohs. That is my rugby league team. And Bridge Rugby League team too.
Yeah.
What is the
Rugby league team.
50-22 rule?
Do you follow rugby league?
No.
You should.
Okay, so it was in rugby league. It's the 40-20 rule. And they put it in rugby union. It's basically if you kick the ball behind your 50-metre line and it goes out after their 22 line, you get the ball back through a line out.
Okay.
But the idea is you kick it out tactically. It's meant to be difficult, but the reward for that is that you get the ball back closer to the other team's line. The problem is 23 metres is not as long in rugby union as it is in rugby league, where it's like 40 metres in rugby league, right? And also rugby union kickers are like, their skill is kicking the ball out further down to get line outs, and you're already getting advantage of doing that anyway, and it just makes the game really unnecessary. And for the purists among the rugby union fans, they should do less things that make it like league. I like both things. I'm a sensible centrist on this matter. I like both codes, but a lot of rugby union fans don't like rugby leaguification of union. Are there any union people in the room who have strong thoughts for 22 room? No? Okay.
I think unions are good, but probably not.
Hey. This is the only union we don't like. They wouldn't pay their players, so that's why rugby league started. But anyway, all sports debates are largely therefore about economics or movement, or, sorry, I forgot the other one here. It's economics, it's movement, like social movements, or it's art debates.
No.
What? Yeah.
As in,
So a motion about allowing performance-enhancing drugs or allowing like human robot hybrid athletes at the Olympics, that is a debate about art. That is a debate about where viewers get the most entertainment from that versus the suffering of the artist, etc., etc. So think about sports debates not as like, oh my god, I don't know anything about sport. Think about it from your strengths. I know things about economics, I know things about movements, I know things about art. So let's think also about what do sports teams care about. There are three big things.
winning.
Money. We all want money.
Yeah.
What's the second thing they care about?
Winning.
Winning. Winning's not important in debating all the time, but it is in sport. And look, I swear to God, if anyone in the debate tells you that you don't want to win all the time, because it's boring as a fan if you win all the time, you've never followed a fucking sports team, you want to win every game, and it always feels good to win every game. And the third thing they care about is
Having
crowds.
fun.
Oh, I said cloud.
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 Oh, cloud. Okay. Not quite. Fans. They care about fans. They care about members, supporters, fans, etc. I think cloud is something they also care about with government. It's probably not generic enough for lots of debates. So, funnily enough, we said they care about money, fans, and success, which seems a lot like the movement debate slides on attention, supporters, and policy change, right? So it's basically the same debates in either form. So sports teams care about those things. Fans too care about a lot of those things. They care about winning, and they care about pure, and the other class about fans, they care about pure entertainment or pure athleticism. So when we go to the Olympics, we want to see the peak of human physique, or do we want to see the most entertaining, drugged-up sports star ever running? I guess you want to watch the most drugged-up sports star, you should watch the Tour de France. But you can compare about which things you like, what fans get more out of. So for example, we have the motion here that new sporting leagues entering new countries should focus on developing the national team before developing local club leagues. How are we going to achieve more money in the first one, in that topic? So we're on AF. How do you think we get more money by... Sorry, let me start that question again. We're AF. We think we should develop the national team first, then figure out the local leagues. How's it going to help us with money?
Lower costs, higher sales.
Yes, absolutely. You know, you have to set up one team versus all these other teams. How's it going to help us on success? With something.
Probably doesn't, because if you have local teams, then they're winning more often. If you have like a very brand new national team, then they're probably not winning all that much.
I think you're exactly right for the negative, but we're trying to focus on the AF. Yes.
Can you train your team better?
Yeah.
And also maybe small numbers of successes are particularly important because it's scaled nationally?
Exactly. And define what success is. Is success winning the gold medal at the Olympics, or is it being at the Olympics? Is it making the grand final of the Rugby League World Cup, or is it, in the case of like Tonga and Samoa, making the semi-finals or making the grand final and necessarily winning it? So define that success and then talk about how you're likely to achieve that more so, targeted resources, development, etc. And then, in terms of gathering more fans, how might you gather more fans in the national team first?
build a narrative and generate some degree of investment, which always is better than focusing on the national team, because there's more people who buy into that.
Absolutely. So they all get on board. They all support the national flag. For no other reason, the national flag. No one follows curling in between the Olympics. But when the Olympics come on, we are all behind that Australian curling team that has to train in New Zealand because there are no curling facilities in Australia. So it's similar sort of theory there. Yeah, there's no curling training, so there's no curling facility in Australia. Our curling athletes have to go to New Zealand and train there.
Wait, isn't it just an ice rink? How hard would it be to make one?
There's one ice rink in New South Wales.
What? No, there's
No,
not.
there's
There's
two.
multiple.
Canterbury shut down.
There's a third one at
There's
the coast.
Macquarie
What?
Centre. There's one at Liverpool as well.
Liverpool shut down.
Liverpool's still open.
Does the one in
Is it?
Canberra count?
Okay, sorry. Let me rephrase this. There's one up to standard ice rink you can play ice hockey on in New South in Sydney. You're right. There is a Central Coast, so the Rhinos play there. So there's two in New South Wales, right? And they are both like ice skating parties, the National Hockey League, and they don't have time for curling. Where were we? I've forgotten already now. But on the neg, you see the flip side, right? So it's like you want to build up local sports, so you have players, people invested, local rivalries, build culture, and that's why people start to care about these sports, etc. All right. Abolishing the. I'm just conscious of time. There's more slides to go, I think. All right.
No.
So
what?
that kind of covers a few broad case areas. Let's now look at some more specifics on how, like, not specifics, more general stuff beyond just particular case areas. Let's talk about building a case from rebuttal. So if you really got no idea what's going on, and you're going to come out of the prep and you're like, all right, let's figure it out. There are ways to build a case on the fly based off what the affirmative team says. This normally only works for negative, to be clear. But also can work if it's second after you've got to do a sneaky reframe because you've actually figured out what the debate is. So what the affirmative team does in their model can massively help you decide on negative what your strategy is and how to do on tactics. And there are keywords in topics that also impact case and strategy and can help you look for clues. So look at the topic and look at the other side. Big one of these is hard versus soft tacos. ¿Por qué no los dos? Surely people got that reference. All right.
See, por favor.
Gosh. It was an old commercial where Old El Paso put hard tacos and soft tacos in the same box. So you didn't have to choose between one or the other for dinner.
And then throw a child in the air.
Yeah, threw a child in the air and the child said, ¿por qué no los dos? And everyone's like, yay. So, a hard model, for example, with a hard model equals more success, but also more harms. So on negative, if you see an app running a hard model, you want to prove why the harms of the status quo, for app rather, you want to prove the harms of the status quo are so bad that it is worth the harms you're incurring to get the success. A soft model is less harm, but also less chance of success. So on app, you want to prove this change is it's a small change, but it's important, and that it's still better than the status quo, and you need to be prepared to defend efficacy. You need to be prepared to defend it will actually work in the real world. So if, for example, the government should actively disincentivize, should actively disincentivize parents from bringing up their children in religious backgrounds, a hard model would be summary execution. That would definitely stop it, right?
Would it?
It would stop like 90% of it, but that might have some harms, right? Like summary execution feels bad. All right, hot takes in the crowd tonight. Conversely, sending a letter saying, "Dear parent, please don't. We'd really rather not." That's a really soft line model, right? There's like no harm. We'll send it as an email to avoid the environmental harms even of letter and paper. But is it going to achieve anything? No. So you want to go more like where's the middle and go a little bit harder than that. Better go slightly harder than going slightly softer. The reason you go slightly harder is because you get more of a guaranteed benefit the harder you are, so you have more to trade off in your case if you go a little bit harder. So where's roughly the middle of hard and soft, go a little bit harder than that, give yourself a guaranteed benefit to trade off. Similarly, if we're invading Venezuela, like a full-on invasion with nukes and tanks and guns might be more effective, to have some harms, but also like the UN setting a resolution saying, please don't have more political turmoil is going to do nothing. I think the Venezuela topic has actually been out of date. I haven't read up on that in a little while as to what's happened with Guido and that. So I don't want to spend time on this topic. I don't quite know enough about it at the moment. Let's look at the negative response to those things though. So if the NAF team goes hard, more success equals more harm plus more harm. You attack them for their harms being bad. You explain why all the harms that occur doing their model are so bad that you shouldn't do it. So if you're a neg, you have a case prep that's like, all right, if they go really hard, we attack them on this front and we prove why that's bad. If they go really soft, so they have less harms and also less success, you attack them for having no success. And you prove why the model actually does nothing. So because if it achieves nothing, then any sort of problem with the model happening means it's not worth doing. Does that make sense? Think and target your case like that. We've already done those examples already. So, the last thing I'd say is with regards to all and never topics. I think I've given this advice to all of you at some point. This is like bloody in the art of war. All or never topics are really bad and also really good depending what side you're on. If you've got a motion that we should abolish all syntaxes, or another example that we should never place limits on any speech, they massively change burdens in a debate. If you're an AF have to ban everything, you have the highest burden, and if you're on neg, you just have to prove one thing, and then you win the debate because they have to prove all things. So AF has a burden of every possible instance, and the negative burden is find one good bad instance and focus on that. A good example of this was a motion of Australs a few years ago, was that we should ban all genetic modifications of animals, or breeding, exact wording. Basically, like, we shouldn't fiddle with the genetics of animals, right? We should never do it. And all the apps are like, think of the pugs, think of the German shepherds, think of like fucking chickens and pigs and they're being beefed up. We should never do it. And then Monash 1 did that, very good Monash 1 team. And Wollongong 1, also a very good Wollongong 1 team, is on neg. And they're like the underdogs, Wollongong 1 at this point, real underdogs compared to Monash 1. And they get up there at one net, first day, like, yep, sure thing, we agree. We're never going to have genetically modified pugs, we're going to stop all that stuff on pigs. But we're going to still allow the genetic modification of mosquitoes in Africa so they no longer carry the malaria virus. And they won, because the affirmative team could not justify why that should be outlawed as well, and they met their burdens of all and never. So what that means then, have I got this next slide? Yeah, strategy. If you're AF, you veto any motion that has all or never in it, or be prepared to outweigh the benefits versus harms in any case, and all your case needs to be focused on outweighing that thing. If you're negative, you preference the shit out of that motion, and you try and get it in there. You need to find one instance or one of benefit or harm, and focus on that, be prepared to weigh it, and that's how you win the debate. So that's a general shorthand strategy of what we should do. Oh, there's the motion, there's the example there. That we should ban all animal eugenics programs, e.g. selective breeding and pure breeding. And this is where Wollongong beat Monash, except the malaria mosquito one. So, good, useful thing there for how to approach topics from topic selection. Oh my God, there's more. Let's talk quickly about backlash. These slides are out of order. So, backlash is another super common argument you'll come across all the time. The teams fuck up all the time as well. What is backlash?
When people make it very known they don't like something.
Exactly. So me seeing this presentation past 7:15 incurred the backlash of Jess giving me this really evil eye from the back of the room. That is backlash. So, who is doing the backlash? It's Jess. What does it look like? Terrifying. The impact is Rob is scared, and Rob wants to finish this presentation quicker. And you need to run through all of those steps for any debate. So if we support Italy taking steps to actively disempower unions, this was one CDC I did with Jess and Anna. Or was it Brie and Anna in that debate? I know it was Anna.
I actually did a family analogy.
That's right. It was the four of us that weekend though, right? Yeah. So, in that case, if that was a motion, so the government's going to do a lot of things to try and disempower unions, take rights and powers away from them. Think about, what is that backlash like? So, suppose start with who's doing the backlash. It is the unions likely to be backlashing. What does it actually look like? What are they doing? Are they going on strike? Are they protesting the government? Are they funding opposition parties? Are they pulling their workers off sites and going elsewhere? Actively describe what it is, and then what it looks like. What is the impact of that? Why do we care about those things? Because often backlash is just like, again, backlash, that'll be bad. The teams don't explain those steps. So if you have a debate where a thing is happening, and there'll be a group of people who will be angry about it. You run a backlash argument, you actively go through those steps of what it looks like and who is doing it. All right, another common argument similar to that is echo chambers. This is a debate you have all the time. If you're banning a free, something on free speech, like deplatforming people with highly conservative views, so saying, no, conservative, you can't come and talk here, or banning climate change denial, or even banning the Nazi salute, all of those who sort of have an argument was like, really bad speech, we should get rid of it, has harms. Negative is going to make a claim to say that by banning it, you actually create an echo chamber, and an echo chamber, does anyone know what an echo chamber is? Sorry? Reddit. Reddit is a good example of echo chambers. 4chan and 8chan, I think are also examples of that.
This is the second one?
I believe there's
There's three actually. There's 2chan, 4chan, and 8chan.
Oh, I never heard of 2chan.
2chan's like the original Japanese one. That 4chan copied itself.
Oh, okay.
8chan's like the even more fucked version of 4chan.
Yeah.
I think 8chan got taken off the internet, but I'm not sure.
Oh, quite possibly. Maybe it's on the dark web, I don't know.
Tell Stu not to stop posting.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go. So, an echo chamber is a place where people with very similar views go to just have that view echoed back at them. And just keep coming, that's why it's called an echo chamber. And they can be good or bad, like going to an echo chamber where everyone loves Star Wars is a good echo chamber to be in. It shouldn't be in those ones where it's like, you can't, if you like the sequels, you're evil. Like, I hate those people. They're bad films, but like, it doesn't make you evil to enjoy them. So, what is an echo chamber? Then you need to think about who is in that echo chamber and how do they get there. You don't just like trip over and end up in the dark web of like Nazis, right? Like you have to actively get there or get invited to those WhatsApp groups. So think about the process of how one person becomes involved in that. And then what are the harms of that? Because often you'll have like, all right, they're in an echo chamber, they're all talking to each other, who cares? It's an echo chamber. It's not getting out of that chamber, no one else is being impacted by that speech. So you think of like, what are the actual harms of being in there? Probably it gets a lot worse and then explodes like the riots in Melbourne last year, or explodes like January 6th. And then the last thing is, can we actively minimize those harms? Can we make it smaller? So if you've got a debate, it's going to have some backlash, it's going to have people pushing into echo chambers. Don't just say there'll be an echo chamber, actively explain what an echo chamber means in the debate and what are the active harms of that. We are at the end. Any questions on anything we've covered or not covered tonight? I know it's a lot of stuff. Is that a hand, Chris, or just fixing your hair?
Yeah, obviously we're pressed for time, so I have to go into details now.
Yeah.
Do you have any first principles for relationship debates?
Oh! Not off the top of my head. I had not thought about that.
Yeah.
Probably says a lot about me in relationships. I hadn't thought about it. I will get back to you on that if I think of anything.
Awesome.
I think the thing with relationship debates is you're trying... I've got something on that. So I guess with a lot of relationship debates, in common relationship debates, you are going to be looking at what is the purpose and necessity of that relationship. So if you're trying to talk about longevity, what does that longevity actually mean and explain that longevity? So why is it important to have someone with you at all times, through ups and downs, etc. What the emotional benefits of that are. These are just kind of stock arguments. But then from the other side, you might be arguing as to why people have a transient role in your life. So why having someone with you for 20 years, and then moving on to someone else is good for you, for freedom, etc. Or simply for 2 days, etc. They're just stock arguments, so I don't have necessarily a first principles approach to those.
All good.
Isaac's got it though. We'll hear from Isaac later. Any other general questions on what we covered tonight? Or not covered? All right then. Well, thank you all very much for your attention. It was a pleasure as always doing the seminar. I will hand back over to Jess. We'll probably stop the recording now.